Hello, everyone. Today, I have a really awesome guest. I gotta, I gotta tell you, Brett, I have never spoke to someone who I felt like I was talking to a computer. Like the extent of your knowledge just absolutely baffles me from like PubMed to your career to your blog. Like when I first read your blog, I was just like, I had to take breaks. It was so brilliant. So, anyway, I would like to introduce everyone to my metabolic life, Brett Smith. Hi, Brett.
Hi, Emily. Thanks so much for having me here today.
No problem. So, what's really, really my favorite thing about you is that you've got all the knowledge, but you've got so much more in experience through your story. So, can you tell everybody just briefly your story before we even get into the encyclopedia that is Brett Smith?
No, absolutely happy to tell my story and rein me in if I go off the rails. But
Got it.
I never meant to go into anything related to healthcare or science. I am a marketing. Well, I was a PR major and a marketing minor out of UW-Whitewater in Wisconsin, and I'm a tennis guy. And I went into sales right out of college, and I've been in sales for the bulk of my whole life. A couple entrepreneurial things that were related to sales, but for the bulk of my life, I was in kind of the health insurance world. And so I started with Cigna Health Insurance, and I called on all the insurance brokers and consultants and provided employers with their health insurance, their disability, their life, all of these different types of things. Spent the bulk of 20 years in and around both of being on the insurance company side and on the brokerage consulting side of things as well. So I would have clients that were companies that would come to me, and then I'd go shop the market for their health insurance plans and tell them, here's what's going on, here's the newest, latest things, and how we're going to help you. And one of the real fascinating things that just a quick throw out because it blows everybody's mind is when I in 87, when I sold my first health insurance plan, I actually sold two of them in the same week, both to well, one to a savings and loan, one to a bank. And they were about the same size, about 150 employees. The single premium was $36 for a month, and the employers were flipping out. The full family with adding spouse and kids on there was $130, and they were flipping out because this is hard covered expense. There was like no deductibles in these plans. These are old major medical programs, which were gone before you got into the workplace. But anyhow, my point of just saying that is that I've watched what happened from the financial side of healthcare to the personal side of healthcare individually, and I've been in the corporate wellness and disease management worlds, and I actually became quite overweight. And shortly upon leaving the disease management corporate wellness worlds, I had the distinction of going from overweight to obese, and then flirting with morbidly obese. And I was a college athlete. So, I mean, as you've heard me say before, I used to be so skinny that people, joke I had to run around in the shower just to get wet.
And you're
So that
what, two?
6'3",
6'3". So yeah, so you can hold your weight really well. So for
especially
you,
when you're wearing a suit coat, because
yeah.
I have, cotton shirts, silk ties, a suit coat, but it gets to a point in the jowls and you start hanging over the neck and things change. But anyhow, so I was running sales and marketing for a corporate wellness disease management company here in the Milwaukee area. And we had some really sophisticated predictive modeling algorithms built into a health risk assessment. With a blood test, we would forecast somebody's ability to. So this was 10 years, kind of 2005 to 2015 area, that we could help somebody find out that they had heart disease they didn't know about. They had, all the 40 different conditions, 12 different cancers. Here's what's going on. Get them to the doctor. Let's try to nip this in the butt. Let's make it a stent instead of a heart attack. So this is the world that I lived in. And it's right here. So the doctor who created the predictive modeling algorithms for the company I worked for brilliant individual. He also taught this course at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, second largest university after UW-Madison, right here. And the, and if you graduated from this class, you were a certified health coach. And then we had all of our nurses, all of our coaches at our company were RNs. And they had to pass this, and it helps you understand motivational interviewing, Protreska's trans-theoretical model for change, everything built on 12-step program methodology and all of these different things, smoking cessation, diet, nutrition, fitness, and it just goes through the whole A to Z. Well, my job was not only in selling the algorithms, but I had to sell the coaching program as well. So I had to become a certified coach, even though I didn't start with being an RN like all of our coaches. But when you're out selling to the chief medical officers at all the major brokerage and consulting houses across the country, and then you're in finalist presentations and you're also reselling these instead of under our private label name, we let the local healthcare system or any healthcare system around the country or a third-party administrator, TPA in the benefits world, they could license them as their programs. But I was always selling to doctors. I had a short stint 1 year where I sold 2 cardiovascular drugs, a sleep drug, Ambien, and a BPH drug. So I was in pharma for a short stint. So I've always kind of worked around doctors, around healthcare, and had to present to doctors. So that was just my whole world. And I, like the 2 owners of the company, none of us were thin people and light people, and including the doctors, one of them. And anyhow, it was just one of those things where we're like, we all got to lose weight because we don't look like we should be an aerobics instructor, which is what people think about with a corporate wellness or a disease management program.
Exactly.
I didn't meet the poster child scenario. But if I lost 20 pounds at that time, I was in the ballpark. But after that and going in doing other things for a couple of years, started a durable medical equipment business where I was traveling all across, and I was living 26 nights a month on the road. Things ballooned up. I tried a couple of different other things beyond our old calorie restriction, calorie in, calorie out model that we were predicated on in my old company. I came across the 4-Hour Body and did that a couple of times, but they were heavily suggesting beans a lot for protein sources, and it always destroyed my gut. And then as I left then also, my wife was diagnosed with cancer. And I had a high school friend
Hmm.
who's passed.
Hmm. I'm so sorry.
I'm the biggest sap with this stuff. But anyhow,
It's
she
okay.
handed me a book about 2 years, 4 years before she passed with her third bout of breast cancer. And it's this anti-cancer book, but it's more attacking things from the plant-based world aspect of everything. And she was all into this. And so I went down in 2014, 15 thinking, well, this is talking about that lifestyle can impact things. And in all of my time in the disease management and health insurance world, nobody had ever spoken the word keto or low carb to me in that 25-year existence, actually closer to 30-year existence. It never came up. But in 2014, I went down the whole plant-based aspect of everything, and I watched. You watch the couple of documentaries that are out there, and you start realizing later. I realized how much propaganda is in all this stuff, and but while I lost 30 pounds really quick in 6 weeks doing a juice fast of just juicing vegetables with a little bit of fruit, it just destroyed my whole GI tract, and I just couldn't handle it, and I had to walk away from it even though I was losing weight and having success that way. And then about 4 years later, I'm at a family gathering, and for my sister's 60th birthday, and my younger brother, I hadn't seen him in 4 months, and he drops like 35 pounds in the time I hadn't seen him. I go, what happened to you? He goes, well, I've been doing this low carb keto thing. And this is where it's the first time I'd heard those words independently or together. And I'm like, just kind of a little dumbfounded because I'm like, well, I come from this world. I know of all the main diets and everything out in the world. I've had to sell about them and be able to explain why ours was supposedly better than all these other things. And so we didn't talk about it that night. And I went the next day to Chicago to play in a national platform tennis tournament. And for a number of years and 4 meniscus surgeries, 2 on each knee, from being functionally fat, I came to the realization I'm no longer functionally fat. I'm just fat now. And that I need to do something about this because it was incredibly devastating. One of my best friends, who was also a college teammate of mine, and just a couple of years, 3 years earlier, we finished fifth in the nation in the 45s, 45 and over age category. And here we are now playing in the 50s, and I'm getting my ass handed to me because I just can't move well enough to do it anymore. So I come back and I'm really motivated to figure out, well, what did my brother do? What is this low carb keto thing? I start diving into it. And I come to the, because I always pro con everything. I never, just in case you're, and especially after my whole plant-based scenario and everything, I just like, you gotta listen to both sides of an argument. Um, and I'm just like hearing things that in the keto, the low carb world, they're saying, well, you don't have to worry about saturated fat at all. It's healthy. And LDL is a very situational thing, kind of based on your physiology and what's going on with your blood chemistry and all these different things. And for coming out of the disease management world, I'm like, first of all, I freaked and I panicked thinking my brother's going to be a skinny guy in a casket. That, he's doing, this is why I'd never heard of low carb or keto, because it's got to be some fad diet. I never heard of it from the industry. So I'm just like, so I go, well, I'll go jump into PubMed, because in my whole pharma world and in my selling the predictive modeling algorithms and having to show the doctors how everything's built, and you do meta-analysis, you do regression analysis to determine the weighting of the individual risk factors. And then as science gets changed, you can just change one part of the little, anyhow. And so I just go, I'll go find the definitive studies on these things to show him that he's doing this stupid fad thing. But then as I kept looking at it and deep diving into them, I go, there's no real great science in here definitively saying what's going on with saturated fat. In fact, now, 6 years and 12,000 hours later, I actually believe, through many different filters, from quantum health, from circadian health, and just understanding what's happening in the mitochondria with the electron transport change and the Krebs cycle and everything going on there, it's the healthiest energy source that you can put in your body. Creates the least amount of reactive oxygen species, thus free radicals. But I didn't know that then, but I started just kind of hitting walls where nothing was making sense. And bought a number of different books and tried to get my brain around this whole LDL scenario, because I sold 2 heart disease meds, and I'm just like, what's going on with how crazy is this? So after about 50 hours deep diving, November into December of 18, I just start saying, all the best quality, because on scientific method, it's a pyramid, just not the food pyramid, but it's a pyramid, and there's observational and expert opinions on the bottom, and then it goes up to different levels of kinds of controlled trials. And the randomized double control placebo is the best, and then there's the meta-analysis of all of those things, and that's the pinnacle of the pyramid. And you start with who has the best data, who has the best science. And everything just started when you actually looked at it and followed the meta-analysis that aren't being talked about, but actually show that this low carb keto thing kind of kicks butt on almost everything out there. And so I started phasing out the junk carbs, especially, and then starting to try to figure out what's going on with all of this. And eventually I started, so I go, well, 1/1 is the great time everybody does their New Year's resolutions. And so even though I phased into it in December 18, 1/1, I kicked it off, realized what alcohol does. We don't need to talk about that, but it just basically stops fat burning until it gets out of your system. And so I go, okay, so for 2019, I'm not going to drink alcohol, and I'm going to live at 20 or under total carbs a day. And because that's what Westman says is the metabolic strength level of carbohydrates and nutritional ketosis. Ketosis starts around 50 carb, 20 you're kind of guaranteed, but you can be at zero because there's no such thing as an essential carb. Your liver makes all of the glucose that it needs from burning fat, either exogenously from the last meal or from what we're carrying around on our body. And everybody, unless you're incredibly anorexic and about to die from it, has adequate enough body fat to survive for a couple of weeks if they really needed to bust off a fast or for whatever different reason, or you're now going to do metabolic therapy for cancer, and or you're about to have a surgery. And all of these things are showing, even yet still, 98% of oncologists don't know it, and 90% of surgeons don't realize that these are protocol. If you really want somebody to heal incredibly fast, come right out of this, not have all the side effects from these major conditions, do it in a fasted state. Well, now I understand all this. Back then, I was just neophyte getting started with all of this. And so there's two more kind of angles in the story. One is that, well, I'll first go through. So in 9 months, I dropped 115 pounds.
9 months, 115 pounds. At what age?
55.
That's amazing. Because so many people are like, oh, I can't, whenever I get older, like things are slower and whatever. Like, no, 55 years old, which is not old, but 55 years old, 115 pounds in 9 months. Doing what?
Well, and the crazy thing with that, and just kind of losing it a little bit with you, and for people, you and I know each other because we both were on Dave Mack's No Carb Life, and I'm not I'm a person who can I get emotionally attached. I can get into a movie and cry during a movie, but outside of those types of things, I don't typically cry. But there's two times prior to getting on podcasts this last few months that I've cried. And one of them is at that 9 month mark. I got off the scale that day and I go, no, it's not like I'm saying I was done at that moment or anything, but just realizing I got to 115 and I went from a 44, 46 waist down to a 34. And so I had a nice little 13, 14-minute cry in my office. Just kind of like, it's not like things were easy at home because nobody else in the family was doing this. So everything that is poison was sitting right around me. And my office is up against the kitchen wall. The old dining room was my home office. And so I'm always one step from the cabinets with the cookies, with the chips, with the ice cream and everything, just one step from where I work. So just an awful lot of just being bulletproof, mentally tough. And then 3 years later, because one of my heroes is Dr. Sarah Hallberg. And that's when I realized, and I had my real true epiphany about the first or second week of November 2018. And I'm like, these aren't chronic progressive diseases that need internal management and drugs for the rest of their life. At first it was like diabetes, obesity, and then hypertension, chronic kidney disease. All of these things are actually quite easily in quite short period of time reversed. It can be 5 to 8 weeks. You know, somebody completely off of insulin if they're type 2. And anyhow, so I then deep dove into Virta Health and the founders of Virta Health, which real quick, just for your audience who might not know. So there's Stephen Finney and there's Jeff Volek, and they wrote The Art and Science of Low Carb Living. And this is the Bible on understanding ketosis. And then there's another one that's specifically made just for world-class athletes, scholarship type athletes and up, kind of how to really do all of this. But what happens is that there's a tech billionaire who has had a Zillow type company, sold it to Zillow, and he goes and wins the 50 and over Ironman in Hawaii. And to qualify that for that, you have to win or finish high in other Ironmans around the country just to go. This is the big kahuna, the big thing. He wins it, comes back to California where he lives, finds out he's so pre-diabetic, he's almost registering as type 2 from where his A1C level is. And he's just, his mind's mentally broken. He's like, how can this be? I'm one of the fittest 50-year-olds in the world and probably fitter than 98% of college athletes. And he goes, how can this be? And so just as when I went down the rabbit hole to try to figure out what is this ketosis thing, and I find the Bible, and I find Dr. Sarah Hallberg, and she becomes, so this billionaire grabs these two guys and Dr. Sarah, who did this TED Talk with 20 plus million views on it, that rocked my whole world on what disease should be. And I send her a LinkedIn invite. She accepts. I thank her. 2 years later, 3 years later, she winds up, well, she was diagnosed at the time of when I found her with this rare lung disease, never have smoked a day in her life. Just, before becoming an MD, she was an exercise physiology, major in all of this. One of the most fit people you ever see. And that was the other time that I lost it. And then it's only when I talk about her. We never met. But she's like this kid sister of mine or, niece that really saved my life.
From that TED Talk.
That TED Talk. I mean, other things were starting to make sense and everything like this, but I'm like, I wasted 10 years in the disease management world when we should be in the disease reversal world. What the hell's going on? And so this pissed me off. And one of my hobbies, or you could say just entertainment things, I love kind of murder mystery, Sherlock Holmes kind of things, Tom Clancy kind of things. And so I'm like, okay, now I get to be Sherlock Holmes and go figure out how did healthcare get so goddamn screwed up? How is this the world that we're living in? And one quick small anecdote. So like suddenly I became obsessed with learning. And I had taken past personality profiles. And so the Gallup Corporation around 2000 came out with a book called Know Your Strengths. And then this is the sales management aspect novel of it and all. And, the first in 2000, I took it and they say you're very hardwired into what your personal strengths are. And, but there's 34 of them that they've identified through 30,000 top executive interviews over 5 years and all of these things. And so I had taken it 3 different times before getting back in. So I decided I'm going to rejoin the disease management wellness world with this new information when I'm down about 55 pounds of the 115. And, but I'm converging stories, I'll quick say. So I became obsessed with learning. And learner was always like my 18th or 19th or 20th out of 34 strengths. So not really high up in what's hardwired into Brett. My wife came home one day and it's a Saturday. I would typically be watching a Badger football game. And I'm sitting in front of the big screen TV, Indian style on the floor, watching science presentations, and she's like, who are you? What did you do with my husband? And if you are him, I'm going to have you committed because you are not you anymore. I go, everything's so screwed up. I can't get over all of this. So I wind up getting back into the disease management world with a company, and they use this as one of their team building and personality profiles, and everybody get to know each other. There's all these different kinds of Briggs type things out there. And they then gave us all coffee mugs with our top 5 strengths.
Oh.
And these 4 were always consistent in my top 5 every other 3 times I took this test. Learner became what I became obsessed with. It just became hardwired into me. So it blew. This is why my wife didn't know who I was anymore, because I stopped watching and paying attention to anything that wasn't trying to get my brain around all of this. I had to figure this stuff out. So, basically, I broke my brain in 2018 in PubMed, and then with Dr. Sarah. And then I jumped back into the industry. The industries aren't always ready for us that want to come in and upset the apple cart and show new things, even though they said during interviews that, oh, they were thrilled that I understood ketosis because Verta Health, that Dr. Sarah went and they thought that they were a direct competition with them. And so like, oh, you understand all this. You can come in and teach us all this stuff. But then, unfortunately, the head of nursing, who spent 20 years in, like me, in insurance, employee benefits, hadn't caught up with all of this stuff yet. And I was sharing things, and she looked at it like a threat to her authority in the company and everything. And we butted heads. And after a year and a half, it was just like 2 years. Go my own way, and I wound up finding myself in the cardiovascular business again. But just the last thing on this is that when I first got that job offer in March of 2019, still at that 55, 60 pound scenario, I was really amped up. Instead of sitting there over 2 times, both those crying episodes came after all of this, but I was just so amped up in my office, I was pacing, because I'm like, this is incredible. I get to go and help change the industry, save the world. And just my mindset at the time, I'm saying all this to myself, and in the back of my head, I say, I'm not on metformin. I am not on a blood pressure medication. I'm going to be thin again in 5 months or so. Whatever it's going to take, I'm staying the course. And then it hit, and I said to myself, I'm bulletproof. And then I realized I'm not so bulletproof. At least I go, it's stupid of me to say I'm bulletproof. Because Emily, 10 years earlier, when I was 45 and more getting started in that corporate wellness position with the predictive modeling algorithms, like I said, we find people that we suspect have disease. We recommend to them and their doctors, go get a CT heart scan to see if there's plaque in those arteries. And so the doc and president of the company said, Brett, you should go live that. You should just go, so you know what a CT heart scan is, how it works. And so at 45, I went and got a CT heart scan, and I had no plaque in my arteries at all. And so so it hit me, because not only did this triathlon billionaire story come to my mind, I also remembered that when I was in college, and one of my roommate freshman year was on both my high school and then the college track and cross country team. So he lived under the Jim Fixx complete book of running, was not only in every library, but was in my dorm room. And every night he would come home to make sure he carb loaded just enough carbs for his tomorrow run to store, glycogen across the body and his liver and everywhere. And so Jim Fixx died at 52 on a 5K run of a heart disease looking like an Adonis. And those 2 scenarios hit me at that one moment. And it was like another epiphany of mine. I'm like, I don't know that I'm okay. Just, because 93% of Americans have some form of metabolic syndrome, and half of them or a third of them still look thin and lean, even though they've got growing disease inside of them. And I'm like, I'm being a moron. Stop thinking this way. So I immediately went and self-referred myself, and I got at another healthcare system. We won't go into why I chose another healthcare system, said the one where my doctor's at, but there's strategic reasons for doing this. Has to do with future life insurance applications. And anyhow, I went and got another test. 2 days later, they call me back, and Mr. Smith, you have a score of 268, which is smack, in the middle of intermediate risk. And I went from 45 having no plaque to 55 having enough plaque that you need to be paying attention. It's a wake-up call. And that was then my other epiphany where I'm just like, okay, well, if everything in the metabolic syndrome is reversible, diabetes, hypertension, all of these different things, heart disease, I must be as well. So I've got to be able to get rid of my plaque. So one of my heroes, who if you go to my Metabolic Life website page, I've got a page of here are the people that in my 12,000 hours of deep diving all of this, the books, the scientists, the researchers, the studies, and everything that, like the books I've shown, that helped me, led me to all of this. And so I, one of those early people I found in my first 60-hour deep dive was Ivor Cummins. And at the time, he was president of the Irish Heart Awareness charity. And I won't go through the story because there's too many stories to go through all these different things about how he got there and everything. But he's one of the most brilliant problem-solving engineers in the world, who then was able to reverse engineer a lot of these chronic diseases stuff and come down to this is an insulin resistance problem, people. This is about garbage carbs coming into your mouth. And you just don't, and once you clean those up, he cleaned up all his things, which led him to looking at this, but none of his doctors could answer the questions on it. And he was hired by another billionaire who thought he was bulletproof and had a CT heart scan in America and found out he had major disease. And so he found Ivor, and Ivor helped him understand all of this. They created the charity. Ivor became the president of it, and he started a podcast called The Fat Emperor, like the emperor has no clothes. And so I now, knowing I've got to reverse this plaque in my arteries, or at least halt it from growing, don't let it turn into an episode down the road and end my life. So my mission became live, not lose weight, don't die. Not that I thought or that I knew that I was at imminent risk, but who knows? Who knows where the vulnerable plaque is? And so Ivor had probably 60, 80 episodes at this point in time on the channel. And like 3, 4 weeks after I found out that I had this plaque, one of the next episodes, and this is such a small world and divine intervention and all of these different things. There's a guy who looks really familiar that Ivor's interviewing, and he's from Wisconsin. And so when I first started in the corporate wellness world, a lot of people just were like, oh my God, you're having this incredible success selling these newfangled wellness programs. And I sold a lot of big companies, including a company by the name of Wausau Papers up in Wausau, Wisconsin, just by where UW Stevens Point is, and just 10 miles away. Anyhow, this guy was on the corporate wellness committee, but he was an engineer and he doesn't come from a health background. But everybody else, now that I understand the story, in his undergrad went pre-med, he went and got other PhDs, and that's why he was at Wausau Papers. But he'd had a story, and this is why Ivor was interviewing him, because he went to the Mayo Clinic in around 2002-ish. And because the doctors who he was in pre-med, when they were pre-med before going to medical school, that are his buddies, run this executive physical program at Mayo. And he came in for a 3-day, put you through every test and every type of thing at Mayo. And as they got him off the treadmill and EKG'd and everything, they said, okay, time to shower up. You're going to go have your last meal, and then we're going to send you home. We've prodded you everywhere you can. What else would you like? Is there any other tests you would like before you leave? He goes, I've heard about these CT heart scans. And they go, yeah, we got that here. We can do that. So they give him a heart scan. He goes and gets a shower. They're waiting for him as he comes out of the locker room area at Mayo, take him into a conference room and have a big thing with, here's your imaging. You have like an 800 kind of a score. I was at 246, 268. And at this time in 2002, they're like, and still most cardiologists today would say the same exact thing to him. You don't have long to live. Divorce your wife, move to California, live on the beach, sell surf wax, enjoy your last couple of years. And he, with a couple of PhDs and all of the brains of these people as well, he's just like, yeah, I might go home and try to figure this out. And that's what he did. And he put about 15,000 hours in the next couple of years. And at Wausau Papers, they're like, give us 2 hours a day. You go spend the rest of your time reading the research and fixing you. And that's
What's his
why he was
name?
on the corporate wellness committee, Patrick Twit.
Wow.
And so he's again one of the people who saved my life because in his story, he reverse engineered reversing atherosclerotic plaque out of your arteries. And then he's the one who kind of taught, there's a big name in Milwaukee here, but big name in the health space called Dr. Cardiologist Bill Davis, William Davis. And he did the Wheat Belly books. And it was from Patrick coming down to Milwaukee to do 30 scans over 4 years, documenting the complete reversal of all of his plaque with the protocol that he, out of these 15,000 hours, figured out that it all has to do with your gut microbiome and what you're doing in there and everything else and what you're eating. And the ketogenic diet is incredibly important for all of this. And I'm like, well, that's awesome. I already got that figured out. I'm already there. Added a couple supplements just in case I'm not getting enough or I'm not topped off enough. And anyhow, so when I left the disease management company that did this with me, um, I wound up finding this another test through two different ways of how to find and diagnose soft plaque in your arteries through a blood test. And I joined that company in 2020, August 2020. And that made it almost a year, but COVID wound up killing the company. Doctors weren't seeing their own patients face to face. They're not about to see a rep talking about a test, talking about soft plaque from a blood test. Just too far out of their ability to understand all of this. But so anyhow, so where I said I broke my own brain in 2019 and 20, I started breaking some of my friends that are doctors' brains. And one of them is a cardiologist who I grew up with as teenagers taking tennis lessons. And then we both went and played college tennis. He's 3 years younger than me. And, but we were in the same like lesson group. And then while we were in college, as I was ending college, we were the summer before going back to my last year, we were both tennis pros at the same club. And then we played men's tournaments together and kind of became buddies through all of this. And then we were on a court that year. I lost all the weight, 2019. And his younger brother is a buddy of mine. We play a bunch of different racket sports together. And I've got a close friend who's a healthcare actuary, brilliant guy who found keto and lost his 20 pounds 8 years before I ever did. Never mention it to me. I kind of still hold that against him for a long time. But anyhow, we're all on the court together. And the younger brother of the cardiologist, whose name is Ryan, the cardiologist, goes, Brett, did you hear about Ryan's heart attack? And I go, like, well, he's warming up next to me on a pickleball court. And I'm like, you just had a heart attack? How did you do that? Because I just saw you at the Platform Tennis Club all winter long. I haven't seen you in only 6 to 8 weeks. And you've had a heart attack. You're back on the court. Tell me about this, because I knew about my CAC score. This is 2 months into me deep diving, and a month after I found the protocol that I thus reversed my heart disease with. And he's just like, he goes, well, it was minor. I just had a couple stents put in. We caught it early, and the heart attack. What kind of score do you have? Realizing he has 3 times more plaque than me, and he doesn't look overweight. He doesn't look anywhere near what you would say 28, 29 BMI. Couple pounds probably, but compared to the average population, he looks very thin. And I go, what are you going to do different? Because now I'm talking to a cardiologist, somebody who I know and I like and known forever. And he's like, well, our dad died of a heart attack, which I was aware of. And that's why he became a cardiologist. And he goes, Sean's already been vegetarian for a while. His brother, across the net. We're both going to go vegan. And I'm like, I've been down this rabbit hole already myself. And I go, the protocol I'm finding, not that you can't do it, because again, now I'm all about metabolic therapy, and you can do it in a number of different formulas and formulations of food. But as he's sitting there eating out of a baggie, a sandwich baggie, Wheaties, like this. And I go, and my first question is, are you diabetic? Realizing that's like the number one risk factor for heart disease. He goes, no, not at all. I go, okay. I go, but why are you eating that? Because that just turns to sugar the second it gets down your throat. And it's turning to it right now as you're chewing it. And he's just like, these are healthy whole grains. And so over that summer, I broke his brain because I started sharing with him all these different studies that I had been deep diving on. And my friend who's the actuary, you know, the four of us played a bunch together that summer. And we slowly started watching my buddy Ryan's brain kind of melt because we'd be playing a point, he'd make an error and end the point in the net. He'd get mad himself because we all get mad ourselves when we make errors. We're all competitive, very competitive people with each other and ourselves. Don't like, you know, screwing up. But instead of getting really mad at him, I'd be across the net from him. He'd look up at me and goes, healthcare's so screwed up. He screamed this at the public courts that we're playing at. Because it was dawning on him that everything that he thought he believed in and knew and understood, that there's holes in it, it's just Swiss cheese right and left, and there's no foundation to be built on. And so I'll zoom in on this and we can because this is starting to probably take too much time for you.
Well,
But
and what I was thinking is that maybe we can definitely have like a part two because I
there's
do,
a whole nother half of all of this, but I'll just finish this story.
yeah.
So it's such a perfect story. And it's why he and I are now doing a podcast together. We're each doing one of our own, and we're doing one together called the Metabochondriacs. Because so as he's breaking his brain, he decides all these cardiologists in his practice believe that the best lipidologist, cholesterol doctor in the state is in Kenosha. She's young, she's in her early 40s, doesn't accept insurance, $500 an hour fee, something for us to get to, and minimum 2-hour appointment. He did a 4-hour appointment with her. And he tells me then in November, 3 months after this appointment, because we're at a charity paddle event that we're playing in, and he pulls me off the side. He goes, Brett, I got to come clean. I went to see this doctor in August. It's now November, and as we started going through what I eat and what I'm doing with all of this, he's like, I said, well, I've got this wired. I'm vegan. I can't get clean or anything than this. He goes, I don't eat meat, fish, or eggs. And she goes, why are you avoiding the most nutritionally dense, bioavailable food that you can put in your body? Catches him off guard. He goes, but I'm eating all the whole healthy grains. And she goes, well, why are you doing that? That's what's going to screw up your glucose and screw up thus your blood chemistries and all of these things. And he goes, you're sounding just like my friend Brett. And she goes, well, who's he? Well, and what does he do? Well, we play tennis and paddle together and pickle, but you know, he's been in healthcare sales his whole life. And she's like, isn't it interesting that the salespeople can figure this out, but you cardiologists are so clueless with all of this stuff of what's going on? So hit some right here and right here. And so he immediately comes home and he starts going towards what I've been doing and sharing with him and coming at it from a ketosis, and brought the meat and the fish and the egg back in. And he had blood tests with her. 6 weeks, had another one, the best result he'd ever had since he was 30 years old in 6 weeks. And then also just one last nugget to finish that out, because it's a perfect story. So as we're planning this last 6 months doing our podcast together, he finally tells me in February, he goes, well, because when I was coming out of when I was in med school and with my dad, you know, I've been a heart patient since I'm in my 30s because of the family history and everything, as he tells the story. And I have permission to tell everything. We're allowed to tell everything about each other. I mean, I don't talk out of turn. But he's just like, when statins came out, right as I was becoming a cardiologist, I got put on one, and I've been on one since I was 30 years old. And he's now, you know, 58. He goes, my LDL's never been over 30 since I've been in, since he's been 30. So he developed 3 times more plaque than me, not looking at all overweight. Now, there are 30 things that lead to atherosclerotic plaque. It's just that LDL is not really one of them. And if it is, it's the bottom, it's number 31 on the 30 list. It's more, and so I'm just like, you've held that off for me for 5 years. You haven't told me. And that I knew he was on a statin, but I didn't realize that he's been on a statin for 30 years and that you know, and so he now calls bullshit on that whole hypothesis. Um, but anyhow, so long and short of it, just to, we can wrap up now. And if you want to do a part two, we can do that. But, so I eventually wound up leaving the sales world because when COVID killed the heart disease company, I've now reinvented myself and I've been working, you could say pro bono or just helping family and friends and kind of saving the racket sport community in Wisconsin, one racket player at a time. And those are some of the testimonials on my website. But I was never charging because I was always employed and I always, made okay money and didn't have to worry about it. But I'm now a full-time health coach concentrating on metabolic therapy, writing a book about metabolic therapy and how it works with everything that you do within your practice. And that people can go to Metabolic Mind and get their brain around all of that, metabolicmind.org, and the podcast of that. But that basically, and this is the reason why it's so fought against inside of the medical, because at the top ends of the medical world, not at your rank and file doctor level, but at the top ends, they realize this is the end of the boon glory days of profits in healthcare if this gets out into the world. And that's why keto is so bashed, even though it's the most studied diet in medical history. And we've been using it as medical intervention since the 20s to reverse epilepsy and almost everything else, as you now realize and dig into these things. And there's cancer treatments and people reversing cancer without chemo. I'm not telling people not to get chemo, not to do radiation, not to pay attention to the oncologist, but ask them why they're not also using metabolic therapy. 16 major cancer centers across the country are. And so whether it's Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, anxiety, schizophrenia, bipolar, my mother, her whole life, bipolar.
Yeah.
Parkinson's, yeah. You know this already. So
Okay.
what we could have done if I had some of this knowledge 15, 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
But no, so got some great testimonials. I've got some great success stories going back on Dave No Carb Life next Thursday with one of my star paid clients who has reversed 20 years of rheumatoid arthritis. A year, 6 months, 7 months before a year and a half before I met her, she went on a GLP-1 for obesity, dropped 120 pounds. It stopped working. We met and she explained to me she was doing that. I showed her my before and after, and I go, well, you can make all the GLP-1 you want. It's just a matter of what you put in your mouth. That blew her away. And so she's after being 7, 8 months stalled, she's off of her GLP-1 and has dropped 20 additional pounds. And she's now off of an SSRI and her brain fog is gone and she's just clear again. And 70 years old, walking without pain and like a teenager, just refinding her life all over again. And so she's going to come on. She wants me sitting next to her. We're going to do it right here for the fourth time on Dave's channel.
I love it.
So each time it was first got rid of her pain, then got her off of the GLP-1. This last time, they don't know yet about, now off of her SSRI, and she's going to tell you the whole story. And this all happened in 2-3 months. She got, all the pain was gone when she hit fat adaptation and got into ketosis. Just boom, just like how with me, I had 90 pounds to go, but all my pain was gone. Anyhow, we can call it right there if you'd like to kind of cut there. But
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Like I said, you guys, it's like talking to a computer. It's absolutely incredible. I love it. I love it. I love it. But one thing,
most computers don't get emotional.
oh, it's beautiful. I love it. It reminds me that you're actually a human. I love it.
Other people
But
get confused that don't watch me become a puddle.
I literally have a hard stop in 180 seconds. But
Yes.
everyone, I am going to put in the show notes. There is an event October 13th called Metabolic Revolution. You have 30 seconds to explain it. Go.
We're all sick and tired, the people that have this figured out, with thousands of doctors around the world that are doing this right and understand how to reverse disease. And there's a movement called the Metabolic Revolution. It's metabolicrevolution.org. Metabolic Revolution, no spaces.org. Go to the website. We're having a rally on December 13th in conjunction with
October 13th.
October 13th in conjunction with the Metabolic
Mind.
but there's a conference going on in
Oh,
DC at the same time, integrative metabolic therapy conference happening at that same time where a lot of the main speakers there are going to be on the stage. A lot of the who's who. I'll leave it at that. Go check out the
Palmer.
website and we'll put the domain in there. Oh, Chris Palmer, yeah, Georgia Edie. I mean, just rock stars that are changing how we look at and treat mental health in this world. It's mind-numbingly going to be awesome. If you can get to DC, do it. If not, if you can donate to it, every organization needs dollars to get going and get started and get the message out there. We're going to try to help promote no longer the American Diabetes Association, but now the new American Diabetes Society. So go visit that site as well. Go to DuckDuckGo because they'll have a tough time on Google finding it. They're suppressing it. So all of these things are a threat to the world
Yes.
or to the profit of the world, but are about the health of the world. I'm done.
Yes. And if you guys, not if you guys, like, you guys have to go to mymetaboliclife.com to find more out about Brett and what he is doing. And thank you guys so much for your time. Thank you, Brett, for your time. We will definitely do a part two.
Can't wait. So sorry I got so long-winded on this short little story.
It's all right. It's so worth it. It was all gold. All right.
Oh,
Bye.
see you soon.